Hello, everyone, and welcome to AgentChat Live on this Sunday afternoon. It's sunny here. I don't know how it is where y'all are, but in Florida, it's sunny. I just want to make sure that we are broadcasting before we really get started. So it looks like people are starting to come in. So cool. Okay. So today, I am very excited to talk to our guest today, a literary agent for over 15 years. Andrea Somberg represents a wide range of fiction and nonfiction, including projects for adult, young adult, and middle grade audiences. Previously an agent at the Donald Mutz Agency and Vigliano Associates, I hope I pronounced that correctly. She joined Harvey Klinger Literary Agency in the spring of 2005. Her clients' books have been New York Times and USA Today bestsellers, winners of ALA's Alex Award and the Nebula, nominated for the Edgar Award, the Lambda Award, and named Best Books of the Year by New York Public Library and Book of the Month Club. She also teaches courses for Media Bistro and Writer's Digest, and you can find the links to her website and social media and everything in the description down below. So please welcome Andrea. Hello.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hi, welcome to AgentChat Live. So glad you could come on today and chat with us. All right. So my goal here is to help potential clients get to know you a little bit better. Viewers are welcome to drop questions. I should say live viewers are welcome to drop questions. If you're watching the replay, sorry, we won't be able to answer your questions. But you can still, listen but I do want to start off by saying that we won't really be asking any questions that like a Google search can answer. So things like word count, genre definition, stuff like that. And also we won't be answering any, what I like to call pre-queries. So like when people are like, oh, are you interested in books about mermaids in space? And that's the example I always use for some reason. Yeah, so just a heads up on all of that. All right, so we're going to get started with a basic, easy question. What categories and genres do you represent?
I represent a wide range of categories and genres. I mean, everything from adult nonfiction, adult fiction, romance, science fiction, fantasy, horror, thrillers, mysteries, book club fiction, literary fiction, YA, middle grade. I really represent a wide range. And part of that is just because of my background. I started out at an agency where I did a lot of genre fiction. I did a lot of and did YA. And then I went to another agency where I did a lot of nonfiction, worked on a lot of celebrity books and things like that. And then, so when I went to Harvey Klinger, which I feel like is over 15 years ago, I decided I'd had a lot of experience with a wide range of different types of projects. And I found that I really liked the variety. And so I decided when I started there that I wanted to keep my list broad. I knew the editors, I knew how to sell different types of projects. And yeah, so I've purposely cultivated my list to be, to have quite a wide range of projects on it.
Yeah, you do have quite a wide range. I guess it would be better to ask, what don't you represent?
I know, I don't do many biographies, but I have been doing quite a few middle grade biographies lately. So I can't even say, that I don't do biographies anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do. And that's actually proves very helpful because I have been in the industry for like over 20 years now. And, it's really interesting because, sometimes, you'll have certain types of books that come into fashion or that you can sell while other types of books become, more difficult. For example, like, new adult for a period of time, like you could sell. And now like, that's, there really isn't that type of category anymore. Or like, romance has become significantly harder to sell. I still do represent it and still sell it, but because with the rise of self-publishing and things like that, because the price points are so low, the romance market has changed significantly. So, it's been interesting kind of seeing the ebbs and flows and, what editors are looking for all the different types of genres and age groups.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to say like, I pretty much read everything except horror and historical fiction, but then like every historical fiction book I've actually read, I've really enjoyed. So I can't say that anymore. And
Yeah.
I read The Year of the Witching, which is, I guess, horror, and I love that. So yeah, apparently
I
can't
know. That's
rule
exactly
it out.
right. Yeah, I feel like every time I say like, oh no, I wouldn't be interested in that. I wouldn't represent. Like I find something, I'm like, oh my
Well,
God, this is amazing.
yeah, like I read Codename Verity. I'm like, I literally cannot say I don't like historical fiction anymore because that was one of the best books I've read in a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So why did you get into agenting in the first place?
I somewhat fell into it. I was lucky enough when I was in college to get an internship with the Don Moss agency. And I love to read, and I think that was something that, made me think about going into something having to do with books. And I started working for them and luckily the timing worked out where I actually had 2 years before I was graduating, but they actually had an employee who was leaving in 2 years they knew. So they were like, if you come back next summer, we can then offer you a job after graduation. So, especially because I feel like the publishing industry can be really hard to, break into to get like sort of those opening positions. Like I was incredibly lucky with how the timing worked out with that.
Cool. All right, so we have a question from one of my Patreon supporters. So my Patreon supporters can submit questions ahead of time. And this one is from new Patreon supporter, welcome, by the way, Quincy. And Quincy asks, do you mind having clients who write in multiple genres or categories?
No, not at all. Actually, it can be really great. Publishing industry can be difficult. For many, many different reasons. And so I'll give like 2 different types of examples on why it could potentially be useful if an author is interested in writing in different genres. So one of the things about publishing is that it can take a long time. So for example, like say you were to, be writing, say YA, and you did a 2-book contract with a publisher. Well, with the way that the dates work out, you would then potentially be, depending on how the option clause read, you could be potentially, you would be under contract for those 2 books, but you couldn't necessarily write any other books during that time period, which, can be problematic because, a lot of my clients, like they love to write, they just want to continuously be writing. And so, sometimes then it can be helpful to be able to maybe pivot to maybe, write, something maybe for an adult audience or maybe something for middle grade or something along those lines, because that's something that we could then go out with and we wouldn't be tied to the publishing contract for the YA. Similarly, if, for example, sometimes like you write a book and maybe the sales aren't as great as you wanted it to be. And then so sometimes it can be hard to sell your next book in that genre. And that's because bookstores base their orders on your next title on how many copies of the original book they were able to sell. And so one of the first things that publishers do when they're considering a new book by an author is to look at the sales of the previous book. And so sometimes, there's various ways to get around this. But one of those ways is sometimes to pivot a little bit and to think about, okay, well, is there a different subject I can write about, or a different genre, or a different audience? In that way, we can then go to the publisher and say, look, like that first book, like maybe the sales weren't great, but this book is very different. And you can do that. And so yeah, there's ways to do that. And so I have a ton of clients who write in different genres for different audiences. My client Sarah Beth Durst, she has written like 24 books, I think, all for adult and YA and middle grade and picture book. And we're actually going to be announcing a new deal for her recent soon and everything like that. So like, it's just, so it can be very useful. On the other hand, I have clients who are like, no, you know what? This is the type of book I like. This is the type of book I love. Like I want to write in this, for this audience or this type of book. And that's great too.
Yeah. And with you representing such a wide range of genres and categories, it might be easier for you to actually represent someone who writes in multiple categories and some other agents who specialize a little bit more.
It's really true, and that's part of the reason why, in terms of my thinking of keeping my list broad, that was part of my thinking as well. Because I mean, certainly my goal for my clients is to be their best advocate, and part of that is career planning, and it can be hard to do career planning. If you're only, representing like one genre or for one audience or things like that. I mean, certainly you can have different agents for different types of books or things like that, but there can be a benefit to have all of it in one place, and then being able, because it can get complicated with contracts and when things are delivering, and also, how to build your name as an author. And so yes, that's, and I also, because I do represent so many different genres, and so many different audiences, like I do know what is, what people are looking for in those different areas. So I can also give advice in terms of that if I have a client who's interested in maybe pursuing a different type of path.
Yeah. All right. So you've seen the show before, so you know what's coming up. I'm going to give you a chance to brag about yourself, so please take advantage of it. If someone is thinking about querying you and your wish list lines up with their work, why should someone query you?
Wow. Well, so I have been doing this for a long time, almost over 20 years, or I don't know, something like that. And I do, I would say, I do know what I'm doing. And I do, and I've, but part of it is like, once again, like what we were talking about in terms of, I think that, certainly also too, if you are particularly looking to write for different audiences, for different genres, I can be very, very helpful when it comes to something like that. But yeah, I mean, I like to think that I'm really great to work with. I like to think like, I'm very communicative. I will check my email in the middle of the night, which probably isn't the best in terms of work-life balance. But I'm a bit anal retentive when it comes to things like that. And I like to think, in terms of my clients, it's a partnership. Like, my goal is to help them realize, their goals, to help them, achieve what they want to achieve. And so that's everything from, yes, obviously, like selling the book is very important. Finding a good home for the author is very, very important. But then, there's so much that comes after that in terms of, making sure that promotion is happening when it's supposed to be happening, helping the author get blurbs, figuring out, like, are there, different things we can do in terms of building buzz for the book, making sure that, things are going smoothly with the publisher, and, are there maybe other, opportunities for the client? Maybe there's work for hire projects they might be interested in pursuing, or maybe there's, new opportunities these days in terms of like writing for apps or writing for, those types of things. So I try to keep up to date so I can present all of the different opportunities to my clients in case it's anything that they might want to take advantage of. So yeah, and then, of course, like selling film, TV rights, selling audio rights, selling translation rights, those are all things that we take very seriously and are very, aggressive about, I would say. So,
Cool.
So yeah, like that's, yeah.
Yeah. And we read in your bio too, you have a lot of best-selling authors, award winners, that kind of thing, right? So there's that too.
Yeah. I've once again, I've been doing this for a long time, and so it's, and I have a lot of great clients, a lot of great authors who their work is amazing. But yeah, I'm always looking for new authors and new projects that I'm going to fall in love with and be passionate about, and hopefully have a really long, great relationship. with the author. So
Yeah, awesome. All right, so we have another question from a Patreon supporter. This one is from Lodestar. And he asked, since you represent pop culture in nonfiction, what do you think is the most important hot topic of our current time?
Oh gosh. Wow, that's a really good question. I feel like I'm going to spout something out, and then an hour from now, I'm going to be like, no, that's not no. It can be so interesting because I think that like a lot of, it's so there's kind of a bunch of different discussions going on here in that, pop culture books in some ways have gotten harder to sell to a certain extent because of the because just so many much more books are being sold online. It kind of used to be a lot of types of pop culture books or books that kind of lent themselves to that type of thing. A lot of times those were great like point of purchase types of books. So like they would be like near the cash register or on the tables at Barnes and Noble. Back in the day of Borders and things like that. And so we've certainly I think that really for something to work in that space, it has to really, the appeal has to be immediate, and it needs to feel like something that's, going to have, just a built-in audience. And so whether that's something where like, it could be, obviously it could be an author who like already has a following on Instagram or on, somehow online or something like that, or through some other platform, or it could be something that touches upon something that has like, a lot of pop culture appeal that people are really into, but it does it in a way that's different from anything else out there. And here's the problem is that it's also something that lends itself best to book form versus something that is better served through some type of other type of platform. So I think that's really kind of the big challenge is like, okay, so like, why should this be a book? And why is this? And so I think that's kind of the big question in terms of like pop culture titles. And I feel like I skirted the question.
Well, I feel so like on the Print Run podcast, especially Eric talks a lot about like what topic deserves a book versus like an article in WAPO, like and you really have to think about that when because the book's like, a book, unless they crash it, it's not coming out for like a year, or longer. So exactly. All right, so so a lot of times when this question is asked, like someone will say something like, if you had a magic wand, what would you change about the industry? Which is like a frustrating question to me because I'm very pragmatic. And so I'm like, there are no magic wands. So what are we going to do in real life, So if you were, say, like the CEO of Penguin Random House and you could make a big change in the industry, what do you think you would change?
I think, I think this is something that a lot of people would, bolster as well, is that certainly more diversity in the industry, there are steps being taken, but, certainly we've got a long way to go. Salaries, that's something that we've talked about.
Yeah.
It's also interesting. Like, I know there's been a lot of talk about salaries, on for publishers and them raising the price and, their price, the, beginning salary. And also too, is that really, even so, that's still challenging, especially living in New York. But I also think that kind of, it's going to be really interesting seeing what's going to happen post COVID in terms of New York and how much of that is based there. I'm going down like a weird, I'm going down another rabbit hole, but I'm going to circle back to the question. I think the other thing, just talking about, compensation in the publishing industry. And I think that, and I also think that obviously ties into diversity. I think you have a lot of people who go into it who can afford to go into it, because it's not necessarily, you don't necessarily, a lot of times you don't make that much money for a long time until you get to a certain point in your career. And even then there's no guarantees. What's really interesting too is on the agenting side of things, we've seen, it used to be when I started off, like you would start off in an agency, you get a salary. Usually as an agent, like you would also get maybe a salary and some type of draw. So like you would get a salary and a commission type of thing. Lately, we've seen more and more agencies where it's commission based only. So a lot of times you have agents who are maybe trying to make the step up from assistant to full-time agents, and they are just existing on the money that is coming in from a percentage of the commission that they get. I mean, that's obviously very, very hard, because like a lot of times, like it takes time to build up your list. It takes time. And then you build up your list, and then royalties come in for previous titles and things like that. So it's been kind of a really interesting trend to see how that's happened. And I'm not sure what the solution is for the agenting side of things, because I do feel like a lot of agencies are working on very small margins as it is. But that's certainly a trend we've seen in the past few years.
Yeah, and especially the agencies that are commission only that require you to be in New York. It's like only a very small subset of people are able to do that. So it's whether they have family supporting them or spouse supporting them, or some kind of cash, flow.
Yeah, it's
whatever
crazy.
it may be. All right. So if you send a client, what can they expect after? What does your process normally look like? What kind of communication style do you have? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, so, the first thing, the first, a lot of things happen at once. We have an agency agreement, we talk about that. We work on revisions to the manuscripts. Certainly, sometimes that means overarching revisions. Sometimes that means revisions on a line by line level. I am always, I am lucky enough. So I'm lucky enough to be, at a point in my career where I can take on, just clients and just, books and things like that I absolutely love. I'm already very passionate about a project when I take it on. Any revisions or things like that, like it would be in the service of making it the best project possible. I've been doing this for so long that a lot of times I can anticipate, if editors are going to have reservations, what those reservations are going to be. And so a lot of times I am able to guide my authors in terms of, we might want to think about changing this aspect of the story, or working on this part or something along, things along those lines. That being said, certainly it's the way I view this is that it is, this is my author's book. It's their vision. So I can give advice based on my years in the industry, but certainly I am not, I do not know everything, or like I do not. So like it is a conversation in terms of revisions. And yeah, simultaneously, we're working on submission lists and submission strategy. Normally, as I'm reading a manuscript or a proposal and considering whether to take it on for representation, I'm thinking, yes, do I love this? But also, do I see a clear route to see this successfully to market? So a lot of times I'm already thinking like, what editors will be a best fit, best submission strategy. And so then that is then a conversation that I have with the author, maybe there's certain imprints or publishing houses or editors that they're really excited about. So that will certainly, affect things. And so, yeah, so we kind of work on that. I work on, my pitch. It used to be when people were actually in their office, I would call them up on the phone and be like, I have this fantastic project. Maybe one day we'll get back to that. I hope we will. But and I work on also my written pitch too, in terms of what I send along when I send the manuscripts. These days, I also do my initial reaching out is by email because, that's kind of the only way to do it at this present moment in time. And then we go from there. And, a lot of times my primary goal is to create as much momentum behind the project as possible. And things kind of roll out from there.
Awesome. So we have 2 questions in the comments that are kind of related to this. So once you've already signed a client, you're working with them. Have you ever had a client who wrote a book they thought was one age group or genre, but you knew was actually more marketable in another? And Jessica Borsey, nicknamed Bert on Wednesdays, is a regular on the channel. And I know that this is something she's looking at right now, middle grade versus YA. So
yeah, definitely. That has certainly happened. Actually, for example, my client JL Esplin's middle grade 96 Miles, which we're really excited about because it's been getting it's made a ton of like state lists and been nominated for a ton of awards and things like that. So like, I feel like it came out during the middle of COVID and I was just like, oh, like this poor book, like it's probably not doing well. And then we actually got sales numbers from the publisher and I was like, oh my God. and then it just recently made all these lists. So I'm like, oh, because it's a great book. But the thing about that book was that it originally was written as a YA, and we realized that it actually would be much stronger as a middle grade, and that was a conversation that Jenny and we had and things like that, and that's ultimately how we sold it. Sometimes obviously there's certain themes or certain storylines which lend themselves better to middle grade, or vice versa, lend themselves better to YA. But also sometimes, for example, you couldn't do this with middle grade and YA because the editors who acquire, within the imprints, like they all acquire middle grade YA. So if they're bringing the project to like ed board, to pub board, like it would be the same board that's making a decision on them. But what we'll do sometimes, and actually going out with a project right now where, it's and this can happen sometimes a little bit more in fantasy actually, although that being said, I've also had it happen with contemporary projects where it could potentially be marketed to an adult audience, but it could also potentially be marketed to a YA audience. And so, maybe we go out with a slightly different version for the YA version versus for the adult version. But it's something where maybe we reach out to adult imprints and we also reach out to children's imprints. Now the strategy of that, it can change depending on the project. But yes, so it is definitely something that happens, and there's different ways to handle it if it does.
Yeah, I mentioned The Year of the Witching earlier, and I know that book had a lot of back and forth for age category. So it was entered in Pitch Wars. I may be mixing this up and maybe backwards, but it was entered in Pitch Wars as a young adult, and then it was aged up to adult during Pitch Wars. And then they signed an agent, and then it was pitched as both adult and young adult to publishers, and eventually signed with an adult publisher. But a lot of people still think it's young adult because the character is younger. So it's funny. Sometimes you have those books that are right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so the second question that we have related to that is, what do you do if a client writes a book that you don't like? Or I guess also talk a little bit about the difference between not liking and not thinking you can sell it.
Yes, that is a really good point. So so now this is obviously like, this is, this certainly does happen. and there's different ways that it can play out. I mean, sometimes if it's something where like I don't like it, but like it's kind of a subjective reason why I don't like it. I have to say that doesn't happen very often. Normally, if I don't like something, like if there's a reason behind it, and that I think that it would be hard to sell for various reasons. But so yeah, so okay, so this is hypothetical because I can't
Yeah,
actually remember a time when a
of
client
course.
wrote a manuscript where I was like, I just don't like this because I don't like it versus I don't like it versus something to sell. But if there was that case, then I think that if I knew that it was just a subjective thing and like I just for whatever reason didn't like it, but you know what? I think maybe maybe publishers would. I would still go out with it and I would represent it to the best of my ability. On the other hand, and sometimes what will happen, obviously, is that there will be a manuscript, a second manuscript or a third manuscript or a fourth manuscript where, I think that there are, potential, problems in terms of whether it would work for the marketplace, sometimes it's just a matter of like, is this book too quiet for as a
Mhm.
second book, or like, would we not be able to sell it just because of where the market is right now? So things like that. So, and that being said, I mean, a lot of times with my clients, like we will discuss their next book. Like we will, brainstorm ideas. Like maybe I'll read like the opening chapters, like as they're writing it or something like that. So a lot of times, maybe this is a discussion that we're having where it doesn't get to the point where they've invested all this time and energy into the book, and then it's like like I don't know if this is going to work. That being said, sometimes. So basically what happens is a lot of times it's just a very honest, open conversation. And I say, look, like these are my reservations. Sometimes, sometimes in spite of my reservations, maybe we will still go forward with it. But a lot of times, maybe we'll revise the manuscript. But then also too, what I always tell my clients is, look, like you want someone who's going to be the best advocate for your book, for your books, whatever that means. So, it could be that like, I just don't have the vision for this project. Like, I don't know what editors to send it to. Like, I just don't know how to position it. Like, you are completely free to go ahead and maybe talk to other agents, like reach out, like I'm happy to give you referrals or like to be like how awesome it is to work with you. Like feel free to like I don't want my authors, and this has to do with publishing, when I go out to publishing houses too, like I don't want my authors to have any regrets, like to feel like, but what if we had done this, or what if I had explored this possibility or something like that. Like I never want to stand in my client's way. So sometimes, they'll go and they'll talk to other agents and see if anyone has a vision for it, or see if someone does. And then, sometimes, maybe they'll work with that agent. Maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't. Maybe they'll come back to me for their next book. It really just depends on the situation. But so yeah. So I guess like the thing is like sometimes like if the author is really passionate, and even if I have reservations, but I'm like, okay, well, maybe I can see a way to make this work. Like maybe I'll go out with it. With that being said, I don't even know if that's always in the best service of the author, because I think a lot of times it's just great. You want an agent who's like, yes, like this. You can feel that enthusiasm. And that's one of the things too. Like back when like I was pitching on the phone, like I would feel like I feel like editors can tell, like they can tell like if you're really excited about a project, or they can tell if you're just kind of faking it. So I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking when this question was asked, it was and it said the book you don't like, and I was thinking about when I was a judge for book awards last year, and there was a book that the plot centered really heavily on a mother's devotion to her child, right? Which is not something that I like in books at all. Like I would never voluntarily pick up a book with that theme. But I had to judge the book, and so I had to like separate my personal, like, it's not even a dislike, it's like a not caring about that theme, you know? So I had to separate that, like, that feeling from, and so I could read it. I'm like, I can see that this is a good book. I can see that people who care about this kind of thing would like this book, right? So yeah, it's definitely, it's something that you kind of sometimes have to do professionally, versus like personal taste versus like the merits of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very true.
All right, so let's do a quick round. So when I originally started this spinoff, so AgentChat Live is a spinoff of my regular show, Pub Talk Live. I was trying to come up with a name for it, and I'm very bad at naming things. So I asked my Patreon supporters if they had a suggestion for it, and Lodestar had suggested Snack Time with an Agent, because I really wanted kind of a casual feel. And I loved it, but I also felt like it implied that it was for like kid lit only. So I didn't go with that name, but this question is the remnant from that. So yeah. All right. That's the only quick round question with the introduction. All right. So the question is, what is your favorite snack?
Enderman donuts, the vanilla kind with the chocolate frosting on the outside, but like putting it in the fridge.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, that's
my parents love the devil's food one. It's like the chocolate with the chocolate.
That one's good too. I also like the ones with like the nubs on it. Like, I don't even know what you explain, but I don't know how you describe that. But the Enderman, the nubby things on it.
They all use like soy flour or soy lecithin, so I can't have any of them. But yeah, I ate them when I was a kid. What is your preferred caffeine source?
So it has changed. So I had a baby 2 years ago, and since that time, I have been obsessed with iced coffee. Like, it is like, 18 degrees outside. I'm outside walking with iced coffee.
Nice. Cool.
I used to drink more tea, and I still drink tea, but like it's iced coffee is my. I think about like where am I going to drink iced coffee, or am I going to get iced coffee from somewhere or something like that. It's been kind of on my one. I feel like I've spent a lot of money during COVID on iced coffee, but like I feel like it's like one of those things that like I can like those small treats that get me through the day.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I drink a lot of iced coffee too, but it's because I live in Florida and it's like 90 degrees 8 months of the year. So
that makes sense.
Is there a word that you irrationally hate?
So oh gosh, I'm going to say this, and I feel like because I feel like I've said before, and like I've had like others be like, no, like but that's in my manuscripts, or like my clients are like, but that's in my manuscripts. I don't like the word smirk. I don't know. There's something about it. I don't like it. I understand why it exists. Like, I understand, but there's just something about it that really bothers me.
Okay. What person do you most want to read a memoir from that, as far as you know, doesn't have one?
So I have this band I really like called The National, and the main singer, Matt Benninger, whatever, I can't say his name right. But I think I want to read a memoir by him. It might not be very interesting, but I feel like the lyrics to their songs are really interesting. And like, I feel like every time I listen to it, I'm like, I get something else from it. It could just be like he was really like drunk or wasted or high or something when he wrote the lyrics. So like maybe there's nothing interesting there, but like I'm a little intrigued. So also my wedding song was that we had one of their songs, and we actually saw him at the Bowery Ballroom. Like, he was doing a show there, and me and my husband like pounced on him like when he was down in the basement, and like he was trying to leave, but really he was talking to other people, and we're like, wait, like, and like we talked to him for a few minutes. I'm not like, I mean, I with celebrities, like I could care less, but just for some reason this, like, I don't know, it was really so him.
Cool. All right, so I'm going to switch up this last question a little bit because we talked a little bit beforehand. So I'm going to switch it to who's your favorite cartoon character?
Oh gosh, so this is hard. Like, so I haven't Gosh, I actually have not watched cartoons in a long time. Like, so I'm going back to like thing.
Yeah,
and like,
go back to your childhood.
Well, yeah, but then I'm also thinking about like I have two stepsons, and like while they were growing up, I watched a lot of like Family Guy and like Bob's Burgers and South Park. But I can't say like I've got any favorite characters from those. Oh my God. I don't even know. For some reason, I mean, like I used to like Rainbow Bright, but like that was a
I
long
loved Rainbow Bright. Yeah. My entire bedroom was Rainbow Bright stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, she was great.
It's a good one.
Yeah. Although Gem, do you remember Gem? I don't know. I remember loving Gem too. So
yeah. I don't know why, but I didn't watch a lot of Gem when I was younger. I was aware of it. But there was we had a Barbie and the Rockers VHS, which I feel like was trying to be like Gem. And I really did like that though.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's yes.
Yeah. Back when we had VHSs.
Yeah. There's a show, I don't know, Kids Incorporated. I don't know if you remember that, but I found episodes on YouTube recently. That wasn't a cartoon, that was part of the show, but like there's all these famous people who are in it, like really famous people now, and they all started in Kids Incorporated. And it's weird because like no one talks about
loved Space Cases, which was like, I think I watched it when I was like 8, 10, somewhere around there. And Jewel State is in it. She's one of the main characters. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's really, it's crazy.
Yeah. All right. So one more question from Patreon supporter Lodestar, and then we'll get to the questions from the audience. What do you like to do for fun or self-care?
Iced coffee. Lately. I seriously, like I had to answer this like form recently, and it was like, what is your favorite activity? And I was like, drinking iced coffee while walking around. So that's just no, but I love to read. Obviously, I don't know. I like to eat. I don't know. Are those activities like I don't really know.
A year ago I played volleyball, but I haven't played volleyball for a year. So now it's like literally walking around my neighborhood listening to audiobooks, which is all I do anymore.
That is exactly. Yeah, like all my mind just goes to like COVID activities, like walking through the woods. Like I've always liked walking through the woods. Like I've liked hiking, but like I can't even, like it's hard to remember like, what did I used to do? So, yeah.
All right. So we have a question from Catherine. Is it becoming more common for authors' manuscripts to be absolutely flawless during querying? I know it needs to be pretty perfect, but is there no way agents will offer rep for a book with flaws?
No, like certainly, like there's a lot of times that like I'll offer representation for projects that I think that like has a lot of potential, or the author has a lot of potential, but that I think that the manuscript needs work. On the other hand, sometimes what I'll also do is maybe I really like an author's writing, but there's something about the manuscript that I think just wouldn't work. And I don't see a clear way to revision. So sometimes I'll just be like, I don't know if this will work, but like, if you ever have a new manuscript or you want to brainstorm new ideas, like I'm happy to talk. But yeah, no. So I think agents will take on projects, like even if they're not perfect, as long as they have a vision to make it into, a manuscript that they think they can sell. It's more that editors, I think, used to take on those types of projects that maybe had flaws or maybe needed work. And these days, editors are a lot more, they won't. It's interesting though, because like I saw there was a Twitter thread recently, and it asked editors, how many manuscripts they receive a week. And incredibly, like this is something I had no idea. Like I really did not know. And it was about 25 manuscripts a week, which is a lot. Like, I mean, certainly as agents, like we get a ton more manuscripts, but like as editors getting it, like they're getting it from agents that they trust, and a lot of times agents that they know. And so those are actually, so that is a significant amount of work to go through 25 manuscripts a week. So I think that it makes a little bit more sense to me now, like why, why a lot of times they won't take on something, or like, I guess it makes a little bit more sense to me now too. I like sometimes like, I just don't, sometimes like it just takes editors a long time to read something.
Yeah.
I think like, I'm glad I know that, because like it gives me a little bit more sympathy or empathy or whatever.
Yeah, I was thinking about that thread too. When you were saying editors are now less likely to take on books that need a lot of work, because there was a lot of conversation in that whole, what you call it, I don't know what you call it, a conversation around a Twitter thread, right? About like the reduction of workforce, but still expecting the same output at publishers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for sure.
It was so interesting. So before the Obama administration left, like, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a law that was going to come into effect, which was going to force publishers to pay everyone on overtime. So any reading that they got done at home, which would have significantly, which would have been great for people in the industry, obviously, but I also think it would have significantly, I'm always kind of curious, like what kind of effect that would have had on the industry. Like, I don't know. I feel like it would have made things even slower, because basically publishers have been like, you can only read a little. I don't know, actually, but maybe editors would have read anyway. I don't know, but that's something that I sometimes think about, like how that would have affected things.
Yeah. I mean, because so like, this is like not really exactly the same, but so I had a contract position at a very large energy company. My degree is in mechanical engineering, and I used to be a tech writer. And they gave me this laptop. So I was working on these documents that were like 80 pages long, and had a whole bunch of graphs and pictures and stuff, right? And the computer crashed all the time because it couldn't handle documents of that size.
Oh my God.
And I didn't have software. I didn't have like Scrivener or any kind of like long form software. It was usually Word. And I kept complaining about it, and no one did anything, right? And we had timesheets then where we had to like charge to projects, right? So we spent like 3 hours on this project, whatever. And then someone suggested this to me, and I did it, where I would put like 45 minutes to 90 minutes a day under the title of like computer downtime, because my computer's crashing.
Yeah.
I couldn't work, right? Within 2 weeks, I had a brand new laptop. And so it's like one of those things where, like, if you show the company that this is costing you money, this is causing, then they're more likely to like give you the things that you need. So I wonder if maybe there would have been some of that.
That's really interesting. Yeah. That's
Because it was like, I mean, they charged the client, $70 an hour for my time, and I'm spending 6-7 hours a week. Like,
yeah. And no, exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's something, there is like something like about it being like on paper and like the transparency and being like, this is
being able to see the numbers, I think is really important to people.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's so true.
All right. So Deidre asks, what's the difference between a literary novel set in 1886 and a historical novel?
Oh gosh. There's not there's not these days. It used to be that sort of sometimes historical novels were sometimes they were seen like as genre novels, like where like they were like kind of their own category and things like that. But the historical that has changed, and part of that is like the historical market has just sort of tanked, and so these days, for something to work as a historical, it needs to have like sort of a literary edge to it. For the most part, it needs to, and this is for the adult market. We can talk about the YA market too, but or middle grade. So like these days, for a historical novel to work, it has to almost have a literary edge, or sometimes like what the industry will call is like upmarket book club fiction. So it's and it's being sold to like these general interest imprints. So it's competing against all of these other like literary upmarket book club fiction books and things like that. So
not much.
yeah. Yeah.
All right. So what draws you into a cold query and keeps your attention?
So certainly the description is important, but I actually tend to skip. A lot of times I do ask people to send the opening pages, and a lot of times I will skip almost immediately to the opening pages, and then maybe I'll go back and read the description, because I just feel like writing query letters, it's a very different art form than writing an actual book. Both require a lot of talent, but like they are different. And so a lot of times I am more interested in reading how the actual manuscript reads versus how the description, because a lot of times even like I'll read a fantastic manuscript, offer the author representation, and I'll go back and I'll read the query letter. I'll be like, oh, this just sounds awful. if I don't like, and then like I totally revise it, like in terms of like when I'm going out, in terms like, I do a totally different description, obviously, when I'm pitching it and stuff like that. So a lot of times it's the actual pages that really draw me. And that being said, like I do think with query letters, I think query letters tend to be too long. I think that a lot of times people tend to give too much details. There's really only 3 things that you need to, obviously it's good to get across like the genre and that type of thing, any comp titles or anything. But and then for fiction, you really want to get across like who the protagonist is, maybe something that's sort of sympathetic about them or compelling. You want to get across like what the conflict is, and you want to get across the stakes. For nonfiction, and then of course, like, any relevant bio information. For nonfiction, it's really the 2 questions you have to answer are, is this, like, why is there a need for this book? So that includes like, is there a hole in the market? Is there a big audience? Those types of questions. And then also like, why are you the best person to be writing it?
Juliana, if you wouldn't mind clarifying your question, I'm not sure if you mean like a difference in length or just the way that the pitch is split up between paragraphs. And we'll get to your question. Hopefully, if you clarify, we'll get to it right after this next question. All right. So my last question for me is, what is your single best query letter tip?
I think, like I said, like sort of like keeping it short, sweet, and kind of answering all those bullet points. I would say that's it. One thing that like I suggest not doing is that, which I see a lot, is people being like, sort of like describing their book, like using adjectives. So being like, this is a great story, or even like, this is a fast-paced story or something.
Yeah.
And the thing is like, that is a subjective thing. And so I suggest trying to avoid any type of descriptor in terms of what your book is in terms of like whether it's good or bad or like fast-paced or humorous or something like that. Like instead, like have the description and then have the actual pages speak to that. Like if your book is going to be humorous, like have that humor come across in the opening pages. And so that would kind of be one of my biggest, suggestions.
Yeah, that's great. When I teach like about query letters, that's one of the things I say is don't editorialize your book.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Don't write anything about it like a reviewer would write about it. And also like you mentioned, it's one of those like show don't tell situations where like if a book is funny, you shouldn't have to tell me that it's funny, right?
Exactly.
If a book is fast paced, you shouldn't have to tell me that it's fast paced. And show that in your query letter, because I used to read Slush for a publisher, and so I've definitely read queries that are like, this is a humorous story. I'm like, wait, what? Where? Like, where was it humorous? In the query letter, so like you can show that in the query letter without saying it, for sure.
Yeah, yes, yeah. Put perfectly.
All right, so Juliana's question was, in queries, do you prefer a 1 or 3 paragraph pitch? I don't really know if that means shortening it, or obviously you prefer a shorter pitch, which you've said. So I think.
Yeah. So I think, So I don't know if you're referring to like, so sometimes like people will do like a one sentence pitch or something like that, like at the top of their query letter. And I think sometimes that can be effective. Like I don't necessarily feel like I feel like it has to be really it has to be really strong one sentence pitch. And sometimes like books just don't lend themselves to that, or it's really hard, in which case I wouldn't spend too much time doing that. Like it's not something that you know, I'll scan to the actual description anyway. But I think a lot of it kind of just depends on, once again, like you want to get those three main points in, or, you know, but you don't, so, but how you divide that up into paragraphs, like it's kind of up to you. Certainly sometimes when people have like manuscripts where it's like from different people's point of view, it makes sense to divide it up into like more paragraphs than you would otherwise. Like you'll introduce a character and be like, give us something about the character and what their conflict is. Give us information about the next character and what their conflict is. And then do a third paragraph where you kind of tie it all together and what the overall conflicts and stakes of the story are.
Yeah, I definitely think it depends on the book, especially like super, super high concept books are much easier to pitch in a short one paragraph, you know, versus like a more kind of sprawling, like let's say literary historical fiction will take a little bit longer. All right, great. Andrea, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you all so much for watching and asking questions. And if you're watching the replay or listen to the podcast, glad to have you, however you are consuming the show. We have Wednesday write-ins are continuing. So every Wednesday at 8 p.m. we get together for virtual write-ins. You're welcome to join us. Even if you're not writing, people come and plot. Some people come and read, some people come and work on blog posts, or whatever you want to do. And then next Saturday's Pub Talk Live is going to feature 2020 Pitch Wars mentees talking about the Pitch Wars experience. So come back for that. And thank you everyone so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Everyone stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask. Bye.